Welcome to Coffee Break with Rachel Vigil, presented by Superbook Sports. Taking a daily look at the biggest stories in Denver sports and interacting live with you, the Coffee Break fam. So sit back, relax, grab a cup of joe, and enjoy your coffee break. Here's your host, Rachel Vigil.
Wow, oh wow, oh wow. Huge news coming out of Broncos headquarters today. Good morning, everybody. Welcome into Coffee Break. I'm Rachel Vigil. Thanks for hanging out with us for the next 30 minutes. We're going to get into plenty of the Randy Gregory talk as he was released by the Denver Broncos. I feel like we're getting new information like all the time right now. So lots of stuff to come. Well, Peterson's going to join us. We got to talk about George Payton, Sean Payton, like so much to get into. And then at the end of the show, if we have time, I definitely want to touch on Coach Prime and what's going on up in Fort Collins, my alma mater up there at CSU. Plenty to get into. Good morning. Okay, let's start with Randy Gregory. Didn't expect this one to come out this morning at all. We saw Essane Bassey get released yesterday, and I was like, okay, they're making moves. I know they're trying to bring in wide receivers to bring them up onto the 53. Like, even though I think they need the depth at safety, like they've got McMillan who's doing fine at the nickel position. So Essane can kind of go. You're hoping you get back Justin Simmons in the secondary. Good morning, everybody. I know everybody is freaking out in the comments. I love it. Keep them coming. Were you surprised this morning when you saw Randy Gregory being released by the Denver Broncos? Here's what really got me. He asked to be traded. Randy Gregory went into Sean Payton's office yesterday and asked to be traded. Now, I had talked to Andrew Mason earlier this week, and I said it was kind of weird that for the first series against Chicago, Randy Gregory was on the sideline, and he didn't even have his helmet on. So it wasn't like they were getting ready to transition him in or anything. Mace said he wasn't like looking too much into it, but there was something about it that was like, you're paying Randy Gregory a lot of money. Like, what's going on here? He obviously wasn't happy with his playing time. I find it fascinating that he went into Sean Payton's office, said, hey, I want to be traded. Sean Payton says, let me sleep on it, essentially. And then this morning, he's released by the Denver Broncos. It's a $22 million cap hit for the Denver Broncos to just release him. Now, they said they did look at other trade opportunities. Nothing really came in for Randy Gregory. And can you blame any of the other teams? Like, Randy Gregory essentially will be on another team. I bet later this afternoon, if not, but for sure by the end of the week, we're going to see him on with another team. But if you're just looking at it, he's had 10, I don't remember what it was. It was like 10 tackles or 10 sacks or something like that essentially lined him up out of the last like 17 games he's played or something. Like, that's nothing, you guys. For somebody who's getting paid that much money, that's nothing. Now, if the Broncos would have waited to cut him after the season ended, essentially, they would have saved $9.8 million for a team that actually is going to be stretched a little thin due to money because of the Russell Wilson contract. I find it fascinating that they just let it go. But here's what this also taught us. George Payton's not in control over their Broncos headquarters. Sean Payton is fully in control because if you're George Payton, you're not like, oh yes, let's let go of somebody that we were highly scouting after last year. We bring him in. We're paying him a lot of money. Randy Gregory is going to walk away with $28 million. $28 million that he's going to walk away from for what? Not really doing a whole lot for the Denver Broncos. At training camp, we were really hyped on him. He seemed really invested in this team. You know, he was pumping guys up. So this comes as a huge surprise to me. Going back to some of your guys' comments, I want to read them. Like, were you surprised? If players who aren't producing are asking for a trade, that's a really good sign. A lot of players need to go. People are saying he was a waste of money. Another bad pick for George Payton. George Payton does well in the draft. He's found little gems here and there early on in the draft. I'll give that to him. But his free agency signings are not good. I ranted about that yesterday. Maybe they need to cut George P. Yes. He ain't worth what we were paying him. That's true. He hasn't. You guys, he has not been worth he hasn't been worth it at all. They have new people that are coming in and able to do it. Nick Bonito. Wow, Nick Bonito is really starting to shine, you guys. We have to give him credit. He was our player of the game. We're going to get into that too when Will Peterson comes in, but Nick Bonito is starting to shine. Here's what else this taught us. I actually think, you guys, that this is the start of the rebuild. Now, here's my only thing with this starting the rebuild. I don't know if a quarterback is going to be a part of this rebuild process. Everyone's like, okay, just start tanking. Like, let's get Caleb Williams, whatever. I think that we're going to see a lot of moves in the next coming weeks, and we're going to get into the PS2 being traded talk, Jerry Jeudy, Cortland Sutton, because I know there's lots of talk about them right now with other teams looking for wide receiver number ones. I know the Bills are looking for a cornerback. We're going to get into that. But I do think we are going to see a lot of moves because they're just going to say, you know what, we're focusing on the young guys. That's what came out when Randy Gregory was released. They're going to focus on the young guys. What do you do when you focus on the young guys? It slowly becomes the rebuild process. And I think right now, my gut is telling me Russell Wilson will be a part of this. Okay. It's a ton of money. And I also think that if you were really thinking about cutting Russell Wilson as your quarterback and just 100% going for the draft, that you would have saved that $9.8 million because you're just losing that with Russell Wilson. That's essentially what they do. If they just cut him, they're just losing so much money when it comes to their quarterback. So they were willing to just say, you know what? Nope, we're just going to do it. $22 million. That's okay. We don't need that money. Randy Gregory can walk out the door. Also, what a nice paycheck for Randy Gregory just to be able to like, oh yeah, I'm going to head to another team. See y'all later. Like, wow. So I could just walk out the door and get that kind of money. Crazy. But I do think that this is the start of the rebuild. Okay, people like it. People are starting the rebuild. They're on board for it. Are you on board for starting the rebuild if Russell Wilson is your quarterback? Let me know that in the comments. That's kind of one of those things I want to know because right now my gut is really just telling me that Russell Wilson is going to be the quarterback of this team next year. You want to hear some crazy stats actually? Let's just pull this up real quick. Right now, Russell Wilson is on pace for 38 touchdowns, 8 interceptions, 4,310 yards, and 106.7 passer rating. That's not bad. That's not bad for an older quarterback in the NFL. That's not bad at all. Sean Payton has come in and done what he was supposed to do. He was supposed to fix Russell Wilson. That's exactly what he's done. Russ looks good. Who's going to complain about 38 touchdowns, 8 interceptions, and 4,000 plus yards? Not me. I'm not going to complain about it. That's actually quite good for a quarterback, especially because you're already having to pay him such huge chunks of cash. But I do think we're going to start seeing trades for Pat Surtain. We know that the Bills are looking for a cornerback, but my only thing with this is everyone's kind of just connecting those two. Pat Surtain is worth more than a late 20, early 30 round pick that the Bills are going to give the Denver Broncos. So I don't really like this deal. I say don't do this with the Bills. Get something more. Find another team maybe that, will look to invest that's a little bit earlier. I don't think you're going to get a top 10 pick for him by any means. But if you can find something else, let me know how you're feeling in the comments. Do you like that? I don't like a late 20s, 30 round pick because I don't think that you're going to get somebody who's equivalent to that. And to be honest, right now, if you didn't have Pat Surtain out there, this secondary is atrocious. Without Justin Simmons being hurt, this is terrible. So you have to keep Pat Surtain. I understand people being like, okay, let's just fully go for the draft. Let's just truly do the rebuild. But to this extent, you're not going to get anybody better than Pat Surtain. You have the number 1 corner in the league, and you kind of are struggling now at depth, at safety, at corner in your secondary. I think you kind of need to keep on to him unless you can get somewhere in the upper 20s. That's where I'm kind of liking it. Or even maybe in the teens. It'd be a push, be a little bit of a stretch, but I do like that. Now, the other stuff that's coming out for trading is everybody is talking about this tweet right here. And that's the Panthers. They're in heavy in the trade market to acquire a wide receiver number 1 for rookie quarterback Bryce Young. Okay. So essentially that leads to, should the Denver Broncos trade Jerry Jeudy or Courtland Sutton? I said yesterday on the show, trade Jerry Jeudy. He hasn't done anything. I'm sorry. We're over the whole, his potential is so high. The ceiling is so high. That's great. He hasn't done anything. He's getting in Twitter fights with people. Things aren't good. He's clearly unhappy. Maybe he should just take a Randy Gregory approach and be like, you know what? I'm unhappy here. Just trade me. Get me out of Denver. Let me go to Carolina. If you're the Panthers, 100% picking up the phone. You are 100% picking up the phone for Jerry Jeudy. I'm on board with that. I love that. I think that it would be beneficial for Jerry Jeudy to get out of here. Courtland Sutton, I also think. But really, what are we going to get for Courtland Sutton or Jerry Jeudy? I said yesterday, you're lucky if you can get a third, to be completely honest with you. I think you're lucky if you can get a third. A fourth, I think, is definitely doable. Courtland Sutton, I'm kind of in that fourth, too. It's kind of a little bit of a stretch there, you guys. But I'm 100% on board. If you're the Panthers, call up the Denver Broncos, see if you can trade for one of those wide receivers. Let's see if we can get some new talent. Marvin Mims, he's been fantastic, you guys. Everyone wants to see him. If you're going to focus on the young talent that you have on this team, then absolutely do it and just go all in for it. Start the rebuild. The rebuild, will you have a new QB? That's also the question. Okay, I said start with the young guys, right? That's who we want to see. Well, one of those young guys is Nick Bonito, as we will bring in our very own Will Peterson. He was our player of the game after Chicago. He was looking good. 4 tackles, 2.5 sacks, 1 forced fumble, and of course the Broncos. Will Peterson, good morning. How are you, my friend?
Interesting day, Rachel. I'm good, but I have a feeling this is the first of many interesting days that are coming in Broncos country. Randy Gregory, the first to go. I promise you he won't be the last between now and Halloween, which is ultimately the trade deadline in the NFL.
Well, that's exactly what I was saying. I was like, okay, here we go. Things are starting to happen. Like, they're essentially starting a rebuild. Now, I don't know, and we can get into the quarterback conversation. I don't know if Russell Wilson is a part of this rebuild or if he is going to be a part of this rebuild and they're going to work around him because he's not putting up bad numbers right now. Sean Payton did what he was supposed to do and he came in and fixed him. But I do think that you're going to see talk about Pat Surtain, which I don't personally love the whole Bills talk. I don't know about you. We'll get to that. But you're also going to see moves for wide receivers here in the next few ones. Which one do you want to see the most out of those?
I mean, if you don't beat the Jets and then you're going to lose the Chiefs, then you're 1-5. Rachel, there's no move I want to see the most because I want to see all the moves. I want to get picks for Simmons. I want to get picks for Sutton, Judy, Bowles. We can have the Surtain conversation. Josie Jewell, if anyone would offer you, like at this point, Rachel, I'm in the let's stockpile draft picks portion of this. And so even if a player can only get you a 5th or a 6th, oh, well, I want the Broncos to have 14 draft picks next spring. I don't want George Payton doing the draft, but I want them to bring in so many new bodies into camp that they do what John Elway, frankly, refused to ever do. And that is rip this thing down to the studs and rebuild it. Rachel, I hope we're at camp next year talking about, I don't know, 30 to 35 rookies based on the draft class and the undrafted guys. And, you know, they're out there with veterans like Marvin Mims and Drew Sanders, because at that point, second-year players would be veterans. Rachel, I am ready to totally start over. I obviously wish they could have gotten something for Randy Gregory today, but he also didn't give max effort against the Bears, so I am glad that they moved on.
Well, and it's fascinating because, Will, I don't know if you had heard, he had asked for a trade. He'd gone into Sean Payton's office, said, can I please get traded? They essentially look, and Sean Payton says, let me sleep on it. Obviously, they're not getting anything. Randy Gregory will eventually end up on a team. That's not going to be a surprise to me, but no one's going to pay him big bucks by any means. But should they have held out maybe a little bit longer, or are you okay with them just giving up the $22 million in dead cap space?
I think they probably made a few phone calls and got hung up on. You know, who wanted that contract, Rachel? No one.
Agreed.
I mean, that you said it correctly. Randy Gregory will land somewhere. You know why he'll land somewhere? Because he'll land somewhere on the veteran minimum. No one was going to take on the rest of a 5-year, $70 million deal. Yet another massive whiff by George Payton. The same guy who hired Nathaniel Hackett made Randy Gregory his top free agent signing in the offseason. And oh, by the way, traded for Russell Wilson, gave him $250 million. So, no one was going to take on that deal. You probably had to call maybe 2 GMs, and both of them said, you kidding me? And then they realized, okay, we will cut him. He will sign somewhere else for a very limited amount of money. And while they do take the cap hit now, it actually does free up about $9 million next year. So bigger picture, Rachel, this is ultimately a good thing for the Broncos. As much as, 2023 is still a wash. I wrote it on Tuesday. It's still a 5-12 football team. Beating the Bears doesn't change anything.
Is it even a 5-12 football team, Will?
I mean, we'll see what happens against the Jets. We don't need to do the game-by-game thing, but maybe 5-12 is generous. Maybe more like 3-14. We shall see.
I was going to say, lots of people are agreeing with you, Will. They are ready for the rebuild. Take it down to the studs. Lots of people in the comments. And I agree. I do think it's time. I think Broncos country is super impatient. But here's my thing. I think Russell Wilson is a part of the rebuild. Now, usually when you have a rebuild, you go get your rookie QB. But they are so in debt to Russell Wilson that I think if they were really thinking about moving on from him, that they would have thought about the $22 million and they would have saved that $9.8 million and just cut Randy Gregory later on this year or after the season ends. Well, I read this to everybody on here earlier. Russell Wilson is on pace for 38 touchdowns, 8 interceptions, 4,310 yards, and 106.7 passer rating. that's not bad for an older QB. And I 100% get it. If you're doing the rebuild, you're just trying to get the quarterback that's going to be able to, be here for the next 10, 15 years. That's always the hope. But how often does that actually work out when you have a quarterback who's looking a lot better?
Well, yeah, a few points on this. First of all, it's a totally different conversation if they lose to the Bears, because then they are in the driver's seat for the number 1 overall pick. Now they're not in the driver's seat for the number 1 overall pick. So they
Which Will Peterson is pissed about.
It was 28-7. I wasn't too mad about on Sunday. It was definitely like that, the girl doing the TikTok where she like starts crying, but she's like happy. That's how I was after the Broncos won. But point being, Rachel, the win did change a lot of things. Like, am I in on Drake May and Shedeur Sanders? To some extent, sure. But I'm much more in on Caleb Williams. Like, he was my guy. Caleb Williams is going number 1 overall, and I don't think, barring a collapse, I mean, it still could happen, but I don't think the Broncos are going to have the number 1 pick. So, yeah, I see what you're saying, but how counterintuitive is it to trade Simmons, trade Jewell, trade Bowles, trade Sutton, trade Judy, maybe trade Surtain, go into next year with all these rookies and say, oh, but Russ, you're still our quarterback. It reminds me of when the Rockies did Todd and the Toddlers, which was Todd Helton and all these AAA guys. And it was like Todd Helton's ending his career looking around like, what are we doing here? And actually, they kind of did that twice. They did it, in the mid-2000s, and then they got good and made the World Series. And then they did it at the end of his career. And, of course, after Helton retired, they got the Nolan Arenados and the Trevor Storys and the DJ LeMahieu's. So long story short is Russ getting closer to 40 every day. Is that a guy who's going to want to sit here and say, yeah, I'll play in 2024 with me and a bunch of dudes who have been in this league 1 or 2 years? I'm not sure that's the perfect match for either party.
Tell me this right now, Will Peterson. What's the biggest position that the Broncos need help at?
Oh, you got all morning, Rachel?
I just need the number 1 position that you're like, man, it's a struggle for them right now.
Well, because Justin Simmons has been out, it does feel like the safety position is the number 1 thing right now. I mean, that secondary is just getting torched. I mean, even DJ Moore had just another huge game against Pat Surtain his second in 2 years. He did it with the Panthers last year. So it is secondary help, and maybe it's another corner opposite Surtain, because Damari Mathis is a fun story, but he's not a number 2 corner in the NFL. So some sort of DB, Rachel, would be my answer. That is if Benito, Cooper, Baron Browning, maybe even Frank Clark sort of live up to the hype. And listen, they won the game because of what Cooper and Benito did. That was the play that changed the entire game, the strip sack, the scoop and score against Chicago. So while some people would be tempted to say edge rusher, I would lean more towards DB. And if you made me pin it down, I would say the safety position.
Okay, I like it. So do you trade Pat Surtain? Everybody's linking him to the Bills right now. Do you trade him for a low 20s or low 20s, early 30 round pick?
Yeah, you're right, because the Bills are going to be a deep playoff team. So that's where it would slot in. No, I would need 2 first-round picks, Rachel.
Thank you. Everybody is like, send him away. And I'm like, no, that's not enough for Pat Surtain.
If you want to give me this year and the following year, I'd listen. If you want to give me your first and second this year and maybe like a 5th or a 6th, then I'd listen. But again, it's about stockpiling capital. And that's the problem with the Russell Wilson trade. They gave up so much capital. They finally get capital back in the Bradley Chubb trade. And what do they have to do? They have to turn around and give that first-round pick to New Orleans for Sean Payton. Rachel, I want them to have a disgusting amount of draft picks. I want us to be watching the draft come April and going, the Broncos are on the clock. And then 4 minutes later, the Broncos are on the clock. And then 9 minutes later, the Broncos are on the clock. Because guess what? You throw a bunch of darts, Rachel, you're going to hit a few bullseyes. Give me 14 darts, and let's see if we can hit 5 or 6 bullseyes with Sean Payton making the draft picks.
So that's so funny you say that, because another one of the things I said we learned about what's going on over there at Broncos headquarters is that Sean Payton is running this entire thing. George Payton had nothing to do with the Randy Gregory stuff. It was all Sean Payton. I do find it fascinating, though, that as we continue to say that, George Payton still has his job and there's still this thing. Like, is it just a little bit of a puppet? It's like, okay, George, this is what we're going to do. Call the people you need to call and be done with it. I mean, we have to give him a little bit of credit, George Payton. and I've been the biggest like critical person on him, is he has found a few good picks in the draft. So you can't just say 100%. Like Nick Bonito is starting to really shine. You got to give George Payton credit on him.
Yeah, but he was a total bust his rookie year. And so last year, all the George Payton defenders had to say, oh, well, Greg Dulcich. George Payton's a genius for drafting Greg Dulcich. Guess what? Greg Dulcich can't get on the football field. So all those people who defended him for Dulcich are now pivoting to Bonito. And then I even got people in my mentions today saying, oh, he drafted Marvin Mims. No, he didn't. Sean Payton drafted Marvin Mims. So, like, let's be careful. Like I keep looking at Twitter going, which one of these is the burner account for someone in the Payton, Paton family? Like, it's bizarre to me that, again, we always put the caveat, and I like George. He's a good guy. Every time I've interacted with him, he's been friendly. I get it. But it's a performance-based business, and his performance has not been good enough. And a once-proud franchise is marred in their worst stretch ever. I understand John Elway didn't leave him with the best ingredients in the world, but he hasn't done anything to improve him in his 3 years as the GM. So to answer your part about the puppet thing, I'm not even sure he's a puppet, because I think Sean's just making the decisions. I think George just kind of still has an office and like gets to go up to Folsom and scout Caleb Williams, because guess what? Sean was on a plane to Chicago, so Sean couldn't go to Boulder. Sean had a game to play on Sunday, so he sent George to Boulder, but I think his role is very, very limited at this point. And if I'm Greg Penner, I just say, you know what? This hasn't worked out. Mistake after mistake after mistake. We're going to go in a different direction.
I've said for Jerry Jeudy, because obviously all the Carolina talk now that they're looking for a wide receiver number one. I think for Jerry Jeudy, a fresh start would be very good. He clearly seems unhappy. That's why he's starting all this Twitter stuff. After a win, you don't see many players hit up on Twitter and start going at people in the media. But with that being said,
and not even just media. I mean, he went after two former Broncos who were both beloved. I'm not saying Rod Smith and Philip Lindsay had the same career. I understand Rod Smith had an all-time career for the Broncos, but Philip Lindsay coming as an undrafted free agent was awesome. Back-to-back 1,000 rushing yard seasons. Rachel, you could argue he was the most popular player on the team in those 2 years, and Rod is, of course, a legend. So, you know what? It would have been one thing for Jerry to go after you or me. It's another for him to not be able to read the room and go after fan favorites like Phil and Rod.
100% agree. Leads me back. He seems unhappy. So maybe he takes the Randy Gregory approach and says, you know what, I want to be traded. And you do look at Carolina. But if you're Carolina, I'm giving up, I don't even know if I'm giving up a third for Jerry Jeudy. And I know that sounds a little harsh, but Will, if you really look at what he's done, it's been so limited for how high of a ceiling he had when he came out of the draft.
Oh, totally. And Rachel, if Carolina trades for Jerry Jeudy, it tells you what contenders think of Jerry Jeudy, right? Like normally trade deadline, we think, oh, contenders, they want to get better. The Chiefs, they need a wide receiver because Patrick Mahomes has no one to throw to besides Travis Kelce. Or even, Miami wants to add, a dynamic guy in the slot to pair with Waddle and Tyreek Hill. We're not hearing those rumors. We're hearing 0-4 Carolina wants to add Jerry Jeudy. Okay, that tells you all you need to know about what the rest of the league thinks of him. No one thinks that he's helping them win a Super Bowl. Carolina's just trying to do something splashy because Bryce Young has looked so awful through the first quarter of the season.
True. Well, Peterson, as always, an absolute pleasure, my friend. Anything good cooking over at denversports.com?
Plenty of stuff. I know Mace is working on a column about Randy Gregory right now, and Jake Shapiro is working on the Baron Browning news. I don't know if you've hit on that quite yet, but there is news that Browning is going to be activated off the PUP, which means, of course, Rachel, another reason emerges why Randy Gregory was cut today.
Absolutely. All right. Will Peterson, huge thank you for hanging out with us. Yes, we do have this Baron Browning news. Mike Kliss tweeting out. He will be activated from PUP and start practicing this week. He suffered a meniscus tear during phase 2 of the offseason program in May. Had surgery, but coming along. Doubt he plays this week versus the Jets, but still another reason Gregory expendable. I am so fascinated by all of this, you guys. Lots of moves are going to be on the horizon. Stay tuned to denversports.com. We keep you guys updated. I appreciate everybody hanging out with us here too. I'm reading the comments and I'm absolutely loving it. I think so many people they all feel the same. Bronco country clearly feels the same about Jerry Jeudy, about Courtland Sutton, the Randy Gregory situation. I thought more people would kind of tune in on the Russell Wilson stuff, but I think people are kind of like 50-50 on Russell Wilson now. If you would have asked us last year, everyone would have been like, get rid of Russell Wilson. What is he doing? but they're seeing that improvement that they were all hoping from. So I think people are more and more kind of going in on it. The Broncos defense has clearly struggled. Will Peterson saying that the secondary, safety, cornerback, that's where he would add for the draft class. Let's look at this stat real quick. The Denver defense is allowing QBs to play to 133.4 rating. Oh man, that's tough. When Justin Fields gets 300 plus yards for the first time in his career against the Broncos defense, you know that's bad. They are completing 78.1% of their passes. They've allowed 13 touchdown passes and 8.4 yards per attempt. Now, Zach Allen spoke to the media earlier this week and essentially said it's not on VJ. VJ's putting together a great scheme for each week. It's on the players. They're not the ones who are coming out there and being able to do what they need to do. It's not on VJ. And I respect Zach Allen for that actually a lot. I think it's fascinating that he's coming out there being like, no, we can't. Vance Joseph will take all of the blame, but we can't put it on it. It's the players actually going out there and doing that. So I find that really fascinating. Here's the other problem. Or maybe it's not a problem. Maybe it's a good thing. But the New York Jets offense ranks 30th in yards with 252.8, 31st in passing yards, and 25th in points per game. You guys, I think, I feel bad saying this. People are going to be mad at me for saying this. I think that the Broncos are going to lose to the Jets this week. I'm sorry. I do just think that's going to happen. Zach Wilson went toe-to-toe with Patrick Mahomes, you guys. That defense was able to, I know they lost, but they were able to keep up with the Chiefs. The Broncos offense is not Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs offense. I'm sorry, it's not. And the Broncos defense, gosh, you guys, they're just so bad. They're 31st. Okay, they're 31st in the league for points allowed per game. That is just terrible. I saw some stat and it was like since 81, they're like the worst defense. Like, great. That's the Denver Broncos right there. Everybody's so hyped about this Broncos team. Yikes. I was watching also Good Morning Football and they were talking about who's going to get back on track this week. And everybody was saying the Jets. The Jets are going to be able to go out there and they're going to beat the Broncos. And you can't really disagree. I mean, what has the Broncos defense done? Even against a quarterback like Zach Wilson, they allowed Justin Fields his very first. And how many years has he been in the NFL? 300 plus yard game. This Broncos defense has struggled, and I know the Broncos got the win, but I don't think it's going to be looking good come Sunday. I'm happy it's going to be back at home. I hope people will rally around this Broncos team. How many no-show tickets they're going to be, I don't know. I think that's also another fascinating point to it, but it's going to be tough. It's going to be real tough. You know what else is tough? Coach Prime doesn't hold back at all when it comes to how he feels. And I love that. If you haven't heard already, the 76ers are up in Fort Collins as they're adjusting to high altitude for their training camp. Nuggets go down to San Diego, so they go down to sea level, and the 76ers come up to altitude. It doesn't really make sense to me, but besides the point. And Prime met with them. And you guys, he did not hold back. He essentially comes out and says, a lot of folks duck the smoke, essentially referring to Embiid when he sat out and didn't play against the Joker, and says they want to be Tarzan on paper, yet you don't get to see it. He's like, if I want to watch that big matchup, I want to watch Embiid versus Joker, and I turn on the game and it's not on, that's not what I'm seeing, then like, what are we doing? And he comes out to say, MJ was never afraid of that. MJ, no matter what, was going to play. He never ducked from that kind of stuff. I love Coach Prime coming out and saying this. I think it is so good. And I love that he's not holding back and just calling out Embiid. Everybody was frustrated that Embiid didn't play. That was just the truth. We were all looking forward to that matchup. And then where was he? He was hiding in a room at the arena. Hiding. He wasn't even out there. He was just essentially hiding from the media because he didn't want to play the Joker. So I love that Coach Prime is calling him out there. Another quick update for you Buffs fans. Travis Hunter, expected to be out until October 28th. They want him to get fully healthy and come back after the bye. They play Stanford and Arizona State. They should be able to beat both of those teams. So you don't necessarily need Travis Hunter. Get him healthy. I was on with Stokely and Josh yesterday. You guys, they were cracking me up. Stokely's like yelling because Josh and I were like, man, it just feels like such a long time. And he's like, guys, he's a young kid. Like, let him get healthy. And you just want to see really talented players out there. I get that. But his health is obviously most important. And then we also, real quick, Shiloh Sanders is coming back. So that's going to be great news for the Buffs defense. Happy to see it. Lots of good comments from you guys today. Yep, CU doesn't need Travis till UCLA. Amen to that. I love how much you guys don't like Embiid. Nick Benito has been fire. I agree with that. Yep. Somebody said 27-16 Jets. We're going to get more into the Jets tomorrow. Plenty to talk about as we kind of dissect that offense with Zach Wilson. Are they starting to rally behind him? A great question. With all the changes that's going to be happening in the Broncos locker room, are things going to start to get a little misjumbled? Are we going to start seeing a little bit angrier locker room? Lots to talk about. Thank you guys for hanging out with me here on Coffee Break this morning. We'll be back 10:30 tomorrow morning for another episode. We'll see you guys then. Bye, everybody. Have a great day.